It was a brisk Monday morning on Capitol Hill. The air buzzed with anticipation as reporters flocked to the Rayburn building, cameras ready, microphones held out, and producers whispering last-minute notes in frantic preparation. The Senate had just concluded a fierce session debating the latest round of Trump administration tariffs, an issue that had ignited fierce division along party lines. The press was waiting for statements from both the Democratic and Republican leadership. Chuck Schumer, the minority leader of the United States Senate, appeared first before the media gaggle. As always, impeccably dressed and sharply composed, Schumer cleared his throat and leaned in toward the podium microphone. Another week, another catastrophe under Donald Trump, he began, flashing a smug smile. And as usual, instead of offering transparency, the White House hides behind its young press secretary who's more interested in reading cue cards than answering real questions. The crowd chuckled. Schumer, sensing the press feeding off his sarcasm, pushed further. Frankly, if I wanted to hear another bedtime story about how tariffs build America, I'd turn on a children's cartoon. Ms. Leavitt should stick to Instagram filters and leave the real economic talk to the grown-ups. Laughter echoed from the press pool. Several reporters smirked, a few even laughed outright, recording Schumer's words gleefully for viral social media clips, but Karoline Leavitt, watching the broadcast from the press room just 2 floors below, didn't flinch. A former journalist and rising political firebrand under President Trump's second term, she had endured worse. She had dealt with ambush reporters, snide late-night show monologues, and even open ridicule on the Senate floor. But this time, it wasn't just personal, it was political warfare. And she was armed with a file labeled Project Reclaim. 15 minutes later, Karoline emerged from the White House press room, confident and deliberate. She stepped onto the South Lawn podium in front of a sea of reporters. The sun reflected off her signature white blazer, and she took a deep breath before speaking, her voice as clear as crystal. To the American people, good afternoon. I've just watched Senator Chuck Schumer deliver what I can only describe as performance art. If he wanted to be a stand-up comic, he should have taken the HBO deal when it was offered. The crowd chuckled nervously. Karoline's tone shifted immediately to laser focus, but today is not about cheap insults. It's about facts. And I've brought receipts. She held up the folder marked Project Reclaim, waving it slightly before placing it down on the podium. This administration doesn't need Schumer's approval to do what's right for American workers. What he doesn't want you to know is that our latest tariff policy has uncovered something shocking. And it's directly tied to a multi-billion-dollar loophole that Senator Schumer not only knew about but shielded for over a decade. The press erupted with murmurs. Several cameramen adjusted their angles. One CBS correspondent mouthed, "Did she just say Schumer is involved in a loophole scheme?" Karoline continued, "For years, U.S. manufacturing was being undercut by imported Chinese steel labeled as agricultural tools, a loophole Schumer conveniently defended in trade committee meetings. Why? Because several companies behind the scheme are tied to lobbying firms that donated over $8 million to Democratic PACs from 2012 to 2020. Now the silence was deafening. Every hand was up. Reporters scrambled to pull campaign finance records on their tablets. Schumer's earlier jabs were suddenly not so funny, and here's the kicker, Karoline said, narrowing her eyes. While he mocks me for reading cue cards, I wonder if Senator Schumer remembers this email his office sent in 2016 urging customs officials to ease up on port investigations in upstate New York. She clicked a remote. Behind her, a screen blinked to life, displaying a redacted email header with the subject line, "Urgent, avoid escalation at Buffalo Port." Gasps. Shouts. A reporter from Politico stumbled over his words. Is that real?" Karoline nodded calmly. "Senator Schumer just mocked me. Now I ask him, is he ready to answer some real questions or just dish out more jokes?" Back in the Senate office building, Schumer's team was in panic mode. The moment Karoline Leavitt's bombshell press conference hit the airwaves, aides scurried to secure the video clips, scrub past emails, and call in legal consultants. A junior communications aide nervously approached Schumer in his office, holding her phone out. "Sir, you might want to see this." Chuck Schumer leaned forward, his face tightening as he watched Leavitt speak with poised precision, displaying the incriminating email on national television. When the image of the email header came up bearing the unmistakable congressional email domain and timestamp from 2016, his jaw tightened. "That can't be the final version," he muttered. "There's context missing." Within minutes, a hastily typed statement from Schumer's office hit Twitter and inboxes of major news outlets. Today's claims by White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt are not only baseless but a clear attempt to distract from the administration's reckless and isolationist trade policies. Senator Schumer has never interfered with any investigation at any U.S. port and supports full transparency. But the media wasn't biting. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow's staff began investigating the source of the email. On Fox News, Tucker Carlson teased Chuck Schumer just got torched by Karoline Leavitt with receipts, actual, literal receipts. What's he hiding? By noon, hashtags like #SchumerEmailgate and #CarolineStrikesBack were trending nationally. At the White House, Karoline returned to her office where President Donald Trump himself was waiting. He had watched the press conference live from the Oval Office and offered his signature grin when she walked in. That, he said, pointing at her, was brutal. Beautifully brutal. Karoline smiled but remained focused. We're only halfway there. The email is just the start. Wait until we publish the port shipment logs. Trump leaned in, intrigued. Are they airtight? They're devastating. Meanwhile, at CNN headquarters, a behind-the-scenes editorial meeting took a sharp turn. A producer who had covered Capitol Hill for nearly a decade raised an eyebrow at the documents. Look, I've been around long enough to know Schumer's fingerprints when I see them. That email didn't come from thin air. Someone's leaking from his side or covering themselves. The newsroom was suddenly alive with speculation, some even contacting the Port Authority in Buffalo, New York. A port whistleblower, anonymously speaking to a reporter, confirmed, "Yeah, we got unusual pressure in mid-2016 to hold off on inspections." The name on the emails? Not surprising. Later that day, Schumer appeared on CNN with Anderson Cooper to do damage control. Sitting across from the host, he looked tenser than usual. "Senator," Anderson said pointedly, "what about the claim that your office contacted officials to ease up on shipping inspections tied to tariff loopholes?" Schumer exhaled deeply. "Anderson, let's be clear. Congressional offices often communicate with ports, constituent concerns, labor disputes, international delays. But to suggest I protected illegal importers is absurd. This is political theater, Trump's White House turning serious policy into a smear campaign." Anderson wasn't letting him off the hook. But Ms. Leavitt showed campaign donation data tied to firms who benefited directly from the shipping category you allegedly helped protect. Doesn't that look like a conflict of interest? Schumer shifted. "I never saw those donations. And I have no control over who gives to a PAC. That's like blaming me for the weather." The moment aired, but social media seized on Schumer's phrase, "That's like blaming me for the weather." It was instantly turned into memes, GIFs, and late-night comedy fuel, but behind closed doors, Schumer's mood was no laughing matter. He called a private meeting with his top aides and legal counsel. "I want everything vetted now. Emails, calendars, donor logs. If there's any exposure, we bury it before the ethics committee starts sniffing." The team nodded grimly. The sense of invincibility that had once surrounded Schumer was now cracking, all because of one fiery press secretary who hadn't even been born when he first entered politics. By Tuesday morning, Capitol Hill felt like a volcano on the verge of eruption. News fans lined the blocks around the Senate and White House, and every political show, left, right, and center, had Karoline Leavitt's name in their A-block scripts. As pundits debated her shocking claims, Karoline herself was already preparing the next phase. She stood in the Roosevelt Room with a few close members of the administration's communications team, laying out folders across the conference table. "These are the shipment logs," she said, her voice firm. "This is proof of over 300 flagged containers, all marked agricultural tools, that passed inspection during Schumer's so-called constituent coordination." The room went silent. Each log, obtained through FOIA requests and a quiet investigation launched months earlier, listed contents that didn't match agricultural tools at all: steel alloys, electronics, and in one case, raw industrial waste. All imported without proper tariffs. And nearly all shipments were cleared through ports in upstate New York or New Jersey, Schumer's home turf. By noon, Karoline called for a surprise press briefing, unusual, especially back-to-back after yesterday's firestorm. The press packed in tighter than ever. "Thank you for returning so quickly," she began, holding up one of the port records. "Yesterday, I showed you an email. Today, I'm showing you a paper trail." She projected a screen behind her showing detailed shipping data. For over a decade, certain lobbying groups, many with direct ties to donors of Senator Schumer's affiliated PACs, have exploited tariff loopholes using fake classifications. Steel from foreign nations, some hostile to our interests, was labeled as farm equipment to avoid U.S. tariffs. Our administration, using updated AI screening, flagged the pattern within the first 90 days of enforcement. Reporters were stunned. Karoline pointed to a specific entry on the screen. This shipment from 2018 alone, 2,000 tons of mislabeled shovels entered through Buffalo with no inspection. The consignee? A firm now revealed to have paid $750,000 in donations through intermediaries to groups supporting Senate Democrats. The firm's D.C. lobbyist also visited Senator Schumer's office within the same week. A reporter from Reuters shouted, "Are you accusing the senator of corruption?" Karoline didn't flinch. "I'm stating the facts. If those facts suggest misconduct, it's up to the Ethics Committee and perhaps the Justice Department to determine that. But make no mistake, this administration is pulling back the curtain on how Washington used to operate." Reporters swarmed her with questions as she left the podium. Meanwhile, the video went viral within hours, earning 4 million views on X, formerly Twitter. By evening that same night, Karoline appeared on The Ingram Angle for an exclusive sit-down. She wore a steely look of confidence as Laura Ingram leaned forward. "You've just triggered a political earthquake, Karoline," Laura began. "Schumer's office denies everything, says you're waging a smear campaign. Are you prepared for legal retaliation?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "This isn't about me or about politics. It's about accountability. For decades, politicians like Chuck Schumer operated behind a wall of insider deals and vague constituent requests. I didn't create the paper trail. I'm just holding it up." Laura smirked. "Do you think Chuck Schumer underestimated you?" Karoline paused, then delivered the knockout line. "He thought I was just a press secretary with cue cards. Turns out I had subpoenas." That quote would be replayed across conservative media for days. Meanwhile, calls flooded into Schumer's office from donors, allies, and media demanding answers. More troubling for him was the sudden interest from inspector generals' offices and congressional watchdog groups. On the Senate floor the next day, Schumer tried to pivot during a press huddle. "I've said what I need to say. These are dangerous times for truth, and we can't allow this administration to criminalize oversight or dissent." But the damage was done. Even centrist Democrats were quietly distancing themselves, worried about being tainted by association. Some progressive members, previously loyal, began calling for an internal investigation. The chessboard had changed. Karoline Leavitt, once mocked as a mouthpiece, was now a force to be reckoned with, and Chuck Schumer's political armor was visibly dented. The halls of Congress were buzzing, not with the usual idle gossip, but with speculation that a major ethics scandal was about to explode. Senator Chuck Schumer, for decades a dominant figure in Democratic politics, was now being whispered about in the same breath as corruption and backdoor deals. On the morning after Karoline Leavitt's second bombshell press briefing, the cracks in Schumer's foundation deepened. Moderate Democrat Senator Joe Manchin appeared on Meet the Press and cautiously commented, "If there's proof that members of our party were involved in unethical dealings at ports or with foreign firms, we need to address it head-on. No one is above the law." That remark sent shockwaves. Hours later, Senator Kyrsten Sinema posted a vague but pointed tweet. "Transparency must be consistent regardless of party." Behind the scenes, Schumer's Democratic colleagues were growing restless. A senior senator from the Midwest, once a staunch defender, told a reporter off the record, "Chuck needs to clear the air fast or step aside. The longer this lingers, the more it drags all of us down." In Washington, silence is often deafening, and Schumer's once loyal allies had begun to go quiet. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt had become a media sensation. Not one for self-congratulation, she stayed focused. With the president's blessing, she arranged for the administration to release a declassified memo written by Customs and Border Protection in 2020. The memo documented unusual congressional correspondence pressuring review timelines and specifically referenced Schumer's office. Fox News led with it. Breitbart called it the smoking gun. Even the Washington Post, no friend of the Trump administration, ran the headline, "Schumer's port pressure, legitimate oversight or ethical breach?" That same day, Chuck Schumer held a rare closed-door meeting with his closest advisors in a private Senate chamber. The mood was grim. "We can't get ahead of this," one senior aide admitted. "The documents are real. Even if you were acting in good faith, the optics are disastrous." "I didn't authorize anything illegal," Schumer snapped. "Sir," another whispered cautiously, "that may not matter now. Perception is reality. You're being painted as the symbol of swamp politics. And the GOP is sharpening the knives." Schumer buried his face in his hands. "I underestimated her." Elsewhere in Washington, young conservatives rallied. Social media erupted with memes of Karoline standing with receipts set against an image of Schumer floundering. At Turning Point USA and PAC circles, she was being hailed as a future political heavyweight. More notably, independent voters began to shift. A poll conducted by Emerson College showed a 7-point drop in trust for Democratic congressional leadership in just 2 days, citing perceived impropriety related to port shipment investigations. President Trump capitalized on the moment. At a press event in Michigan, he quipped, "We sent Karoline in with a microphone and she walked out with the truth. I've hired bulldogs before, but this one? She's got fangs." The crowd erupted, but while the Republican base was energized, the Democrat side fractured further. A progressive watchdog group, Blue Justice, issued a formal letter requesting the Senate Ethics Committee launch a review into Schumer's communications with federal agencies and lobbyists from 2015 to 2020. Then came the final blow. A leak. A whistleblower from within the Port of Newark forwarded an audio recording to a major news outlet. The recording, dated 2016, featured a staffer from Schumer's office urging port officials to streamline the process and avoid flagging shipments that have already been approved upstream. Within 12 hours, the Daily Caller released the story exclusive audio. Schumer office urged port to look the other way on imports. Schumer's world imploded. That night, he released a shaky video statement from his office. Gone was the confident strategist. In his place was a man clearly cornered. "I may have exercised poor judgment in trusting the wrong people, and I deeply regret if my actions ever gave the impression of impropriety. But I have always served with integrity." It wasn't enough. Across the aisle, Republicans prepared to move forward with a formal ethics inquiry, and some even floated the idea of censure. And at the White House, Karoline sat in the press room watching the video of Schumer's half-confession. She looked at the staffer beside her and said quietly, "He's not going to survive this. Not politically. Maybe not even legally." The tide had turned. Washington, long ruled by legacy and leverage, had just witnessed a revolution sparked by one woman, a stack of papers, and the courage to call out the establishment, live, on air. 3 days after Karoline Leavitt's stunning revelations, the nation remained glued to the unfolding drama. News anchors treated it like a political thriller. Viewers watched, stunned, as what began with a smug comment from Senator Chuck Schumer transformed into the potential unraveling of one of the most entrenched political powerhouses in the country. The Senate Ethics Committee, under immense public and political pressure, released a statement, "Given the gravity of the allegations and the supporting documentation now in the public domain, we will be initiating a preliminary review into the actions and communications involving Senator Charles Schumer and associated staff members concerning port regulation advocacy between 2015 and 2020. Though carefully worded, the implication was clear. This wasn't just a routine check. Back at the White House, Karoline Leavitt remained composed and sharp, though her quiet moments revealed a weight on her shoulders. The media was relentless, some calling her a whistleblower, others accusing her of political grandstanding. But Karoline wasn't seeking attention. She was seeking change. In an impromptu hallway exchange with reporters, she clarified, "This isn't about left or right. This is about Washington doing right by the American people. For too long, powerful people have acted without accountability. I simply had the courage to shine a light." The American public seemed to agree. Polls from Gallup and Rasmussen showed a rare moment of unity. Over 68% of voters across party lines believed Schumer should temporarily step down pending the investigation, facing immense pressure. Chuck Schumer announced a temporary recusal from his leadership duties, saying, "While I remain confident that I acted within the bounds of my duties as senator, I will be stepping aside as minority leader until this matter is resolved." It was an earthquake in Washington. The press swarmed Karoline again that afternoon, but she surprised everyone with a final twist. Holding a quiet, late-afternoon briefing, she stepped to the podium and said, "Now that Senator Schumer has agreed to recuse himself and the Senate is initiating a review, the administration will refrain from further comment on the matter pending the outcome of the investigation. But I do want to speak directly to the American people." She took a breath. "We are living through a moment where Americans are more divided than ever. But there's one thing we should never be divided on: truth. Transparency should not be partisan. Whether you support President Trump or not, whether you vote red or blue, this White House will fight for accountability in government. Because the swamp doesn't drain itself." The statement was met with a standing ovation by conservative press and cautious respect from even left-leaning outlets. Even MSNBC's Rachel Maddow admitted that Leavitt's words, though controversial, echoed a rare sense of moral conviction in a town that often rewards silence over honesty. But Karoline wasn't done yet. The next day, she sat for a 60 minutes interview, her first major long-form national appearance. In it, she detailed how the administration had tasked her, months prior, with rooting out hidden weaknesses in the tariff system and foreign import enforcement. It was during this effort that Schumer's name surfaced repeatedly, not through malice but through patterns. "We didn't start by targeting Chuck Schumer," she said. "We started by asking why steel from adversarial nations kept showing up duty-free. His name found us." The interview aired on Sunday night and captivated over 18 million viewers, one of the highest ratings the show had seen in years. She spoke calmly, earnestly, and without gloating. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer remained silent. Legal analysts speculated that his legal team had advised him to avoid press appearances. Behind closed doors, rumors swirled that more staffers were preparing to testify. One already had secured legal representation and immunity. The whispers of a full-blown federal investigation grew louder. On social media, the hashtag #Karoline trended for days, used both by supporters cheering her bravery and opponents arguing she had crossed ethical lines. But even among detractors, a grudging respect grew. She had not only faced one of the most powerful men in American politics but held her ground without blinking. That week, at a White House luncheon, President Trump made a surprise announcement. "Karoline Leavitt has shown the kind of grit and integrity we need more of in Washington. That's why I'm proud to announce I've asked her to lead a new Bureau of Government Accountability, tasked with reviewing lobbying practices, procurement irregularities, and transparency enforcement across federal agencies." And she's agreed. The room erupted in applause. It was official. The press secretary had become a watchdog, a symbol of change in a city known for its resistance to it. Days later, in an emotional private moment, Karoline called her parents. Her father answered and she said softly, "I think we actually made a dent in the system." "You didn't just make a dent," he replied, choking up. "You made history." And indeed, she had. The girl once dismissed as too young, too brash, too partisan had stood toe-to-toe with the old guard and won. Her sharp mind, fearless heart, and unshakable sense of duty reminded Americans that truth still has a place in Washington and that sometimes it only takes one voice to make the mighty tremble.